Ladies and gentlemen, could you please take your seats? We'll be getting underway in a few moments. Please take your seats. The show will be starting in a few moments' time. Please be seated so we can get the show underway. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Aquarius Elders Dinner. Just to give you a little bit of a heads up as to what's going to happen tonight. About a dozen people are going to be giving tributes to elders no longer with us. We thought tonight was an appropriate occasion. Sadly, of all the people who were key movers and shakers back in 1973, many of them are no longer with us. but we thought tonight was an appropriate time to acknowledge them. So we're going to do that in the first part of the program. Then we'll be inviting you to get your main course from the kitchen, according to whether you've ordered vegetarian or non-vegetarian dishes. They'll both be available. Then for the second part of the program, we're going to have some slightly longer presentations of people who were major contributors to the whole aquarium, not just to the festival, but in fact in the 50 years since the festival. So first of all, I will ask you to acknowledge Harry Freeman and his wonderful Dollar Brand piano. And I'll hand to Gilbert Laurie to do a welcome to country for us.
Yeah, jingler. All right. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so, welcome to the Aquarius Elders Dinner. For me to come and for you to do this for you guys, give me great privilege because my mum was sort of here back when that first Aquarius Festival came into our country. All right. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about her later on. What she contributed to the Aquarius Festival back 50 years ago. So I was running around here at that time. I was only a little young Junnigan, little boy. So I remember bits of it and good parts of it. I opened my eyes up. And I'll explain that too. So I'm gonna do a little acknowledgement to country for you guys, all right? I'm not going to do a welcome. I do them welcomes when I welcome these politicians and these governor generals into our country, So for us guys to gather where we are gathered, I'd like to say, Nyagala, Nalina, Wijable John Nine, Jogan, Galawade Galaningla Banjalang Jogani, So welcome to our land of the Wijable people, of our great big nation, the Bunjalung Nation, which is a great big nation, all right? We go from the mighty Clarence River, we go over that border, we go up to the Logan River, out to a place called Warwick. In our language we call it Wadding, all right? Wadding means cold, so it's a cold place at Warwick. Out to the Condamine River, all the way down to Tenterfield, down to the Man River. So it's a big area, the Bunjalung Nation. So we are the Wijable people of this great big nation. Our neighbours to the north of us, that little hill there, as Blue Knob, Mount Burrell. The original name for that place is called Burrell, So they was pretty close when they said Burrell. So they wasn't far off it when they said, Burrell means mountain range, or the mountain peak. So on the other side of that is what we call the Nundawal mob and the Midjinbul mob, Down to the east of us, we have got the Nyanbul people, The place as Ballina. Well, we call it Bullina, all right. Bullina, place of the big river. So then we got all our family place to the west of us, the Kyogle Casino mob. They are known as the Gutterable people. So it was when our old people come together at this Aquarius Festival. I had some strong old, my grandfathers who was here at the time. We will talk about them when we have a conversation. So I would like to pay my respect to my old people who walked before me. So I say, Garama, Gala, Jumbana. Jumbana the Gala. So when we say our old people, it relates to what we call a cigarette or a smoke. It's the colour of most of our elders' hair in here, all right? You got nice coloured hair. So it's relate to that, the greying of the hair. So it's Jumbana to our old people, so I say Garama, all right? And also Garama de Galaningula Mabang, Garama de Galaningula Mirakan, all right? So I'm paying respect to the old men and them old ladies who walked before us. So they were very special to us. So thanks again for inviting me to come along and do this. And to be up here with these two old great guys here, makes me feel good. Yeah, I've known this man for many moons. He have walked with our elders. He had the privilege to walk with our elders. So that's why I got special moments for this guy who was sitting beside me. And John Allen to be around. I seen some footages of the first Aquarius Festival, and for these two to be together to organise it. And like John Allen said, some of the old people who have passed away, I did get the chance to meet a few of them. One very close guy who touched my heart. His name was Paul Joseph, So I would like to acknowledge him. He was a good man, that man. So thanks again, and let's enjoy the night and let's celebrate and have a good time together. So I'll get you guys to say this word, all right? I'm going to get you to say boogle bear. And boogle bear. And boogle bear. So easy to learn in Aboriginal language. No, that means thank you in our language, so thanks a lot, all right?
Thank you so much, Gilbert. And it's a great pleasure to have Gilbert and his partner in Rhoda with us tonight, and to sort of, to see this as an ongoing partnership between whitefellas and blackfellas, which it always should have been. I'd like to introduce now Graham Dunstan, who was the director of the Aquarius Festival. He's going to do the first of our tributes to Paul Joseph.
Can we eat our sushi first? How to speak highly enough of such a huge personality, such a strong character. Paul Joseph. So let me tell the story of how we met on this aquarium. We had come all the way up from Melbourne from a conference of the Australian Union of Students with approval to go ahead with this festival off campus. And we'd driven all the way through the night the next day to end up in Mullumbimby Main Arm to talk to the people. Though the only hippies we knew were looking for us, so we couldn't go into Queensland. This is where we started the search for a site for the Nimbin Aquarius Festival in 1973. And we met Cole Scattergood. And Cole Scattergood said, leave, right? We don't want a hippie festival in this valley. Bit disappointing for our first stop, you knock on a door and they'll go away. The next day we left, but before we left, he came up and said, advice, go to Nimbin, go to the Nimbin Valley, the land's cheap over there. And the other good bit of advice was, there's a guy called Paul Joseph. He was a resident on the property, but we had a fallout. He wants to produce a festival. I thought, that's a good sign, yeah? So we went from Cole Scattergood's place, drove in Vital's car. You were in it, I'm pretty sure you were in the seat, yeah? To Palmwoods, following the directions going over upwards to this high ridge, and eventually the road ran out and we walked the last 50 metres to a banana shed, and there was the man, a yogi, sitting on his mats on a ridge of this glorious view. I was spellbound, I've got to say. And then he stood up. He was so beautiful, right? Long hair, beard, yogic body, tall, he's 6'6". Come here. We sat down, shared a joint, as we used to do at all Aquarius meetings, and we explained our mission. And when we'd finished talking of our vision, Paul rolled up his yoga mat, hopped in the car with us, and became part of the team, as it were, right? As far as I know, the next step in the story is that Paul comes along to a meeting that we have in Brisbane with the Harpo mob. Yeah? He's watched my style. I'm giving a great rave, but Paul sees great future in this. And at this meeting in Brisbane, he picks it up with his guitar and begins singing. So I speak in the first part of the meeting. We share the joint, share food. And Paul would round off with this amazing performance. And the songs he sang, finished, "May a long time sun shine upon you." Yeah? We should sing it together, shouldn't we? In memory of Paul. Yeah? Let's do that now, eh? Can we do that? May a long time sun shine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide your way home. I've got to wind up, right? If you want to find out more about Paul, he immortalized himself in Silicon before he died. He did concerts and recorded them and posted them. I went to his grave the other morning, to do a kind of a dawn service before doing it, asking for inspiration. It's a beautiful valley view from his grave there. There's a bust with Paul, glasses on and wearing a beanie. At dawn, the light perfect, and the inspiration came. This is the quote. Think where man's glory most begins and ends, and say, my glory is that I had such friends. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Graham. I'm going to do the next tribute, which is to Vernon Shaweek. What happened in the months and leading up to the festival is that lots of people dropped everything they were doing in their lives and came and joined us to prepare the site. One of these was Vernon Shaweek, who is now regarded as Australia's premier psychedelic artist of the day. He learned his trade in London with the Carnaby Street explosion. He came up to Nimbin. It was Vernon's inspiration to paint all the shop fronts with those wonderful psychedelic designs, later picked up by Benny Zabel and many others. And I think it's that image of those wonderful shop fronts with the background of the Nimbin rocks that is now kind of, almost like the iconic image of Nimbin. So just to show you a little bit of Vernon's work. He, as I say, was the originator of the whole idea. This is the Rainbow Cafe, where we fed all of our volunteers each night. If you did work in the fields during the day, you got a free meal at night. And it again became decorated rather beautifully. And you can see that basically all of those lovely timber shop fronts became decorated by Vernon. This was the RSL Club, thus the flag, which we used as our main office and media centre. So I'd just like to salute Vernon's contribution, which, as I say, has been carried on by many others since, and I think he made a wonderful contribution to the whole image and the whole ethos of the Nimbin Festival. Okay, Graham's going to start off with this. One of the things that we had people from each city, and there was a wonderful organisation up in Brisbane called Harpo, and Harpo became very integral to both the planning of the festival and basically running food trucks. But Graham's going to talk a little bit about the town meeting and Bomber Perrier from Harpo.
Yes, so we made contact with the University of Queensland campus with this group called Harpo, which were part performance and part food distribution. They introduced Whole Foods and cooperative stores on campuses and things like this, and put on great concerts. So they loved the Aquarius idea. So when it came to gathering a crowd to support our presentation to the village of Nimbin to allow us to do the festival here, we reached out to them and they came in force. And one of the members was a clown, mime, Bomber Perrier. Right? Does that name anything to do? Extraordinary performance in the hall. if I can say it briefly, as people were arriving at the hall, at the beginning, everyone wondering what's going on here. Bomber would stalk them, right? He's dressed in a bodysuit, a red bodysuit, and he's got a plastic mallet, right? And so when they're coming down and taking their seat, he was judging whether they were happy or not. And when they take their seat, if he wasn't, he'd bop them. He's watched by the other half of the hall, right? So everyone's right. And bing, everyone burst into laughter, yeah? So all bad vibes were removed. He was a master performer at this. And Cathcart, Graham Cathcart, a great organiser. Johnny?
Thank you. We had the problem, and it was quite a challenge, not only of having enough toilets and showers, etc. We had no idea how many people were going to turn up until day one. It could have been 500, it could have been 5,000, it could have been 10,000. Nobody actually knows because it wasn't ticketed. So one of the challenges was, how do we feed people? So Harpo took this on. What they did, they got an old truck. They bought food at the Brisbane markets, drove down. What was now the Hemp Embassy became a sort of food co-op. And the idea, we laid all this food out on the floor. The idea was you took what you wanted and what you needed, and you paid what you could afford. When the floor was empty and the hat was full, the truck went back up to Newcastle, back up to Brisbane, and did it all again. So Graham was the mastermind behind all of this. Sadly, he then went off to India and died of dysentery, I think, in India. But Harpo made a wonderful contribution. This is the outside of what we called the tomato sauce building in those days. And you can kind of see why with the splash of tomato sauce. And this is the inside as to what the food co-op looked like. So again, a big salute to Harpo and their wonderful contribution to the festival. I'm now going to hand you to Tom Zabicki.
Thanks. Thanks, Johnny. I'm going to talk about Cole James. Cole, it was around 72, just before the Aquarius Festival. I was in a small, I think, mini moke with Graham, Johnny, Cole. We got to Nimbin, walked into Daisy's Cafe. Cole walked around the streets very briefly, and he said immediately, "I think we can recycle this town," he said. What he meant was he wanted to breathe new life into it, and he certainly did. For him, there was no doubt that this was the site for the festival. So he really got involved. Look, Cole was not a conventional architect to start off with by any means. I'll give you a bit of his background. He took his lead from a breakaway European school which complained that architects had sold out to the rich. Well, Cole was never going to be that person. He used his skills to transform the idea of house from a design object into housing. The actions that over time enriched people's lives. In his own words, he made housing a verb. When I met Cole, and we knew each other in Sydney, we were both at New South Wales Uni, I was doing sociology, he was doing architecture. But he was working and designing and improving Aboriginal housing and community facilities in Redfern at the Block. And this experience he brought to Nimbin, as many of you know, he brought his architecture students up here and set about creating the basic infrastructure for the festival. Open air drop toilets, community spaces, camping areas, saunas, bamboo bridges, dome structures. And Cole made, Norman and Carol Norman, Buckminster Fuller-inspired parachute drome. It became the healing centre. But Cole never imagined the festival to be an end in itself. He maintained his involvement with it, and he made lots of representations to the council, and that eventually led to changes in the planning regulations that permitted multiple dwellings on private land. And that was a big breakthrough. And that extended all over the state in subsequent years. But as a personality, he was an amazing man. He was always on fire with ideas. He had the energy to pursue them as well and to infuse others. Nothing was too difficult or impossible for him. He just charmed people. He picked up on what others had within them and encouraged them to run with them. So he was an activist, but he's also a great influencer. He sat on lots of boards. He got the Order of Australia for his services to architecture and the community. Even when his powers of memory declined, he was always heard roaming around the corridors of the architecture faculty that he loved, intent on completing some forgotten but urgent task. Wow. He was sometimes disoriented, sometimes lucid, but regardless, to the end, he was absolutely committed to his causes, tireless in his pursuit of justice and equity for society and the environment. He never lost that commitment. Cole was a very humble man. He carried himself with a quiet dignity, but he was also a giant who took great strides with gentle steps. He was living proof that sometimes the good guys wear the black hats. There he is. Okay, next. John.
Did you want to do an intro before I start?
Okay, do we have to shift?
Get up there, John.
It's on the screen.
John's doing a tribute to Bill Lucas. John's come a long way for years.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Always somebody who knows better, isn't it? What can we say about Bill Lucas, a man who the gods gave every gift, scattered like pearls from heaven, like a hailstorm, the gifts that he was given. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant physicality. A really wonderful proprioception. He knew where his body was at any given time. Conquered all of the forms of architecture, individual housing in the glass house. His son Peter's here at the moment, is repairing a glass house, the privilege to work upon one of his father's finest work. Multiple housing in the Orange Grove. Town planning in Paddington. They went to Paddington and wrote up every tree that existed in the Paddington area. Established the Guruganya School. Some of the students from Guruganya School are here today. Having conquered all that, he embarked upon what we might call loosely the hippie world, where he abandoned all of the accolades, rather like Graham Dunstan, all of the accolades of the institutions to bring to ordinary people an understanding of what architecture can gift in the terms of housing, in the terms of living, in the terms of constructing, giving to people a stage for the dramas of life. So important to understand that a house gives place to live out life's dramas, the serenity of one room, the eros of the bedroom, the privacy of another room, the elegance and capacity to always welcome into your house, to give hospitality. All of those things. I had visited Bill many times. There was never a time where he didn't put a glass out and say, "Do you want coffee?" No matter how much pressure he was under. There was never a time when I sat at his table to eat with him, and always there was an empty plate with a knife and fork for the guest that might call in. Such genius of being, scattered so loosely into this community and then taken up and marshalled an entire epoch into being, these men did. Marshalled into being an era and an epoch which is so fading away now. I finish at this. Just one understanding that these champions of us, I can nominate them, you know, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Herbert Vere Everett, an Australian. The Conventions of Asylum, 1973, the UNGA, passed it. Gough Whitlam. Leonig, still alive, still with us. Bill Lucas. Why is it that we do not venerate our champions? And here today, I'm privileged to be with you in the beginning of an understanding that we are called upon. It is our noble task to venerate our champions and say, "Here, here." For this will establish us as a nation and build our sovereignty. We must abandon, well, it's forced upon us actually, being a colony of two hegemons, that we venerate Thomas Jefferson. Well, I'd rather venerate Herbert Vere Everett myself, or Gough Whitlam, because they advanced our cause. Or, in this case, Bill Lucas, who conquered all of the forms of architecture and then took upon himself the duty to bring to us an understanding of those forms which would enhance, in his words, enhance the drama of our lives. From small things, big things grow. Thanks. Roger, you?
Yes. In my appointed place, it says my name down here. Well, this is where I've been told to sit. How do I follow that? John Shipton. This is amazing. I'm amazed. Mum, where's the camera? I'm sitting next to John Shipton. Okay, Ricky. We called him Ricky. Ricky was the naughty boy that lived up the road. Our mothers were bohemian friends. And I remember his 12th birthday. Well, there was a bit of a scandal going around. And my mother wouldn't tell me what it was, except that Ricky was a very naughty boy. And she had a fantastic smile on her face when she said that. And I wanted that for me. So, in a way, Richard Neville radicalised me, because I wanted to please my mother the way he did. Here, is my 2 minutes of movie with Richard explaining himself.
I think that the alternative society is a reaction against the sheer joylessness and meaninglessness of most people's lives. That's what the alternative society is all about. It seems to me that there's an attitude towards sex which is different. It's now become much more libertarian and guiltless. I mean, young people do amazing things sexually these days, but which perhaps isn't much different from previous times, but they don't feel at all guilty about it. I think their attitude to culture now is radically different. I mean, whereas before, if something was ephemeral, it was considered to be trivial and worthless, whereas now that's become perhaps an advantage if an art form's ephemeral, like pop music's the obvious thing in that. I think that they now just perhaps... You see, when society does go through a fantastic change, like when the Industrial Revolution came along, there was a drug to go with it. The drug was gin. And I think that there's now a similar fantastic change in a lifestyle, and there's other drugs to go with that, of which the most popular, or the most fashionable, is cannabis. So that seems to me to be part of the underground. Another ingredient is the high mobility of the people involved. That the people don't no longer set about having families living in a suburban house in that one spot for the rest of their lives. They move around an amazing amount. I mean, you get literally, thousands and thousands of people hitchhiking from Istanbul to Kathmandu or to Bangkok for year after year. It's not just a sort of quick 2 months holiday abroad and then back to their job. And it seems to me that the travel or being a nomad is part of the underground situation. And also, lastly, I mean, a political attitude. And a really strong political attitude of anti-authoritarianism, of anti-society. All these are part of the alternative.
Thank you. Rhoda Roberts. Oh, wow, I'm sitting between amazing
What a joy. Thank you so much. Thank you for the wisdom, Mr. Shipton. Thank you. Our homelands have provided many with a place of belonging. And we're very fortunate, my cousin Gilbert and myself, to be here tonight to honour those who were part of 1973. I think one of the big things about Nimbin was country was sung up in 1973 by my uncle Lyle Roberts Jr., also known as Poppy Lyle. He greeted the Kuki-Yalanji from far north Queensland and Mornington Island when they came down to dance. And he, along with a number of other senior lawmen, they were indeed our knowledge holders. And they showed their spirit of generosity by calling country again. And we were left with great words of wisdom from my father, my uncles, my grandfathers, and our senior women, that the place was going to change because for one of the first times in history, people wanted to sit side by side with us and actually have dialogue rather than speaking at us. And on that note, I would like to introduce, you all know him, Gilbert, my cousin, to talk about wonderful auntie. She was my cousin, her mum, Auntie Martha, and my dad were brother and sister. And so, Gilbert, let's hear it about your mum.
Yeah, all right, yeah. Yeah, to my mother, right? Yeah, Vivian Laurie, her name was, She was sort of here when, like I said, I was only a young boy, but I still remember Mum part of being the Aquarius Festival, right? See, where you sort of had that tomato sauce shop was, you know, my mother was part of that too, all right? Like they was talking about distributing the food, you know, to the Aquarius mob. Well, Mum was part of the distributing the food for us mob, the First Nations people, you know. Like when she was cooking for us mob, she wasn't just cooking for us, she was cooking for the town, you know. Like that's one thing when it was with our old people back then. It was all about sharing and caring and getting to know each other, because she talked about Poppy Lyle, you know, Grandfather Lyle Roberts. Yeah, these Aquarius people, the alternative lifestyle mob who come into our lives, you know. Yeah, the other mob out there, they call them hippies, you know. Yeah, they become hippies, but they become very close allies to the First Nations people. You know? They stood beside our old people. And like Rhoda's father, you know, he was like my pop, Poppy Frank Roberts, him and Grandfather Lyle Roberts. So, you know, I had the opportunity to stand beside these great men. They was our leaders we looked up to when I was a young boy. And to have these allies standing and walking beside our old men and these old ladies, saving our significant places in our country, you know, it was great honour. We got places named after these allies, you know. One over there, Protesters Falls, you know, what they done. They went over there, we stopped the logging, and they stood very strong with my grandfather, Lyle Roberts. I remember him standing there and holding back the big bulldozer. You know, he stopped the bulldozer from going into log our rainforest. And it wasn't for these allies standing beside him and climbing up into them trees, you know, and chaining themselves to them tractors. Yeah, they looked after our country. They become part of us. And that's how we look at these allies. They have a connection, like have we got a connection to our country, you know, what we want to preserve in our culture. We got significant places, you know, and it was great. They come on board to help us look after these significant sites. Yeah, they saved our logs. They saved the gold mining in our country, you know. They saved the fracking in our country, you know. So that's why we always stand together and be strong, you know. So to them old people who walk before us, they're like, even I see this old lady on her name mentioned on this piece of paper, and I like to mention her name too, Auntie Katie. You know, Auntie Katie. She's not my auntie, but I respect her because I respect my elders. You know, and that's how I don't care what race you are. You older than me, you're my uncle and auntie. You know, it's just that no segregation. You know, we over that. It's bringing us together. Like we said, 50 years ago, we made good friends, and they are still good friends of ours to this day, you know. And we had some good old fellas who was here. Like I will mention this other old fella's name. His name was Richard Donnelly. All right. He was from the Gizaba mob, up around Mully, up around Woodenbong area. He was one of our last of our knowledge holders too when he come here and he done a welcome with Poppy Lyle. To have Uncle Dickie Donnelly here, representing our other nations within our clan groups, man, it made us feel good as young boys walking around. You know? So yeah, to this beautiful woman who had the privilege, you know, she lived out here all her life, just about before she ended up in a nursing home. Pretty sad when we lose our elders to that bad disease, dementia, you know. And we get them in these nursing homes, and then they start forgetting about the past. But it's good when we go in there and we talk, especially when we talk in our language to our elders, because they understand the language, not so much the English. All right. It's our connection with each other. So, yeah, thanks to to the allies who come into our lives, the Aquarius mob, and to our whole people who they got to meet, you know. They had strong connection together, and that's something I will carry on with our new Aquarius friends. And Benny Zabel, always loved Benny Zabel. You know, he's a good man, that man. So, yeah, thanks again for inviting me and Rhoda to get up and have our talk on behalf of our mob. Great privilege, so thanks again.
Boogle Bear, I just want to also acknowledge Johnny Allen, one of the great mentors I ever had to work in the events area. So thank you, Uncle, for everything you've taught me. And I just want to say thank you all for being our land protectors. You don't know what it means with Terania Creek, what that meant to us. It did change our world. So thank you.
Thank you, Rhoda. Thank you, Gilbert. I'm here to honour Tony Barry, and I
was in New Zealand with a band.
Oh, here he goes. I interviewed him in December, and he really wanted to be here, but unfortunately he died a couple of days later. And I just wanted to read a little bit of it to add into what he's about to say. Aquarius was the beginning of people being introduced to an awakening, but done in such a subtle way that people had nowhere else to go but to change their thinking, and that was really beautiful. I like what Helen Keller had to say, that life is either a daring adventure or nothing, and that's what the Aquarius Festival was, an adventure of the highest order. It was respectful, it was challenging, it was community. It just made so much sense. It was like, this is the way we can live together in the company of one another and get things done collectively.
Yeah, I was in New Zealand with a band called Blurter. The Bruno Lawrence Electric Revelation and Travelling Apparition. It was the 70s after all. I didn't know much about what was going on. I went to New Zealand for a mate's wedding. Then I met up with this Blurter mob, and they knocked me out. There were two 16mm slide projectors, four 35mm slide projectors, an 11-piece Cook and Jazz rock band, you know, and you go, wow, how long's this been going on? And the actors on stage would be actors on the film. And while we were there, Johnny Allen and Trevor Bahu Stone came over, and they were just so enthusiastic about the Aquarius Festival, and they were going to pay to bring us over, and that's all we wanted, because the plan was to take the Blurter bus, which was Bruno's old school bus, and when it came up for auction, he bought it. And it was a Leyland Royal Tiger. It had done, you know, millions of bloody miles. Had lots of adventures in that bus. But then Johnny Allen was there, and he asked us if we'd be interested in coming over for the festival. And the Blurter bus was painted up, and we arrived. And fortunately, we got there earlier so we could place ourselves where we wanted to be. Yeah, it was just such an eye-opener. Those Hessian toilets and men and women sitting next to one another, you know, borrowing paper. It's just, we had no money. We never had any money. Blurter mob. And Philip Lapetit, Man on a Wire, who just got up and when we were performing, because he must have thought we were something like the French thing with the music and the film and all that. And there was a couple of posts either side of the stage, and he threw up a slack wire, and he's doing his bloody fire sticks in there. And I said to Bruno, who the fuck is this? He said, I don't know, but he knows what he's doing, so we'll just incorporate him, which is what we did.
this? Can you hear? Hi. It's my good fortune to talk about John. John Geek was an amazing human being, quite the cleverest person I've ever met in my life. I don't know why he bothered with us, really. He was extraordinary. He had a bit of class. He grew up in Lane Cove, topped his school, got an honours degree, and by the time he was really just in his middle 20s, he came here as a part of a group of us who got some land. And John, with his honours, first-class honours degree, one of his first degrees, began to build our communal space. He built his house. He was not a carpenter, he was nothing like that. He was a kid who did brilliantly at school, and he just wanted to be a teacher, but he found himself caught up in here. And of course he started a school. So the people that will really know him from this room are the people who had kids. John created a school. But after he'd done the school here for 10 or 15 years or so, he then decided that he might as well become a real educator. And within 20 years, he was a professor in Oxford with a PhD, multiple honours. And in fact, he was described when he finally got a professorship out in Australia as one of the few people who was acknowledged as the best in his field, in the world. And he really was that. And I'll just finish with his most amazing piece of research because he died quite young. He formed an organisation at Oxford that experimented with the first of the MRIs, the magnetic resonance machines that could tell an image what was going in the brain. He was always interested in gifted kids. He was pretty gifted himself. And he decided to put some girls and boys into the MRI machine and give them an impossible, but they were all gifted kids, a really difficult mathematical question, and see what was going on where as they solved it. Well, the interesting thing was that the boys answered quicker than the girls. They all got everything right. The interesting thing is that the girls used their left hemisphere and the boys used their right hemisphere. The boys didn't know how they got the answer. The girls knew everything about how they got their answer. He wasn't able to continue his research. It would have been really interesting, wouldn't it? He was amazing. Come out.
Okay, well, Tansen. I remember going to my first acupuncture class, and I went and there was this absolutely gorgeous man, had waist-length blonde hair, bright blue eyes, was super friendly, and we were learning to be acupuncturists. You can feel the chi energy in the wrists. So we were practicing with each other, having this feeling that we knew each other so well. Like, where did we meet? And we went through everything. It seemed pretty unlikely. He was born in London, 1945, with all those bombs going down, doodlebugs, I think, and the third boy. And the mum wanted a girl, so that was, and they all came to Australia when he was 2. And meanwhile, I'd been born nearly 8 years earlier in Wellington, New Zealand, and we'd both come through totally different kind of interests, but that feeling of, I know that person, was so strong. So we just studied together for a year, and we had a practice, and we connected with Johnny and Graham and a whole lot of other people at the beginning of the festival. Carl James made us a healing, like a healing temple out of bamboo in a lotus shape, which was really cutting edge then. And it just was such a time in Nimbin, living in an old tree and just helping with the healing of people was such a special time. It just really blew our mind, and we're probably really never apart again from then. We started the Healing Center and then Birth and Beyond, so we delivered a lot of babies. And Tansen was the most incredible healer. He was really good wherever we went. He practiced and studied and talked to people. And I could see people coming to see him, and they looked like really bent over all the cares of the world. And then leaving, he'd always spent a lot of time with people. So by the time they left, they looked happy. It was like they had a satsang. So he was a really fantastic healer. And when we left Nimbin, we pioneered a lot to do with home birth and water birth, studied hypnotherapy, homeopathy, rebirthing, other things I can't even remember. And then, because you only ever just take the shiny bits out and use them, don't you really? You just you don't take everything on board. You take the really shiny, attractive bits and just put them all together somehow, and it's amazing what happens. Well, that's how I kind of wing it. So Tansen was like, he was loved everywhere we went, and we had encountered Buddhist teachings and meditation practices here in Nimbin, and there we are in the Healing Center. We practiced in Nimbin, and then all over the world. So we've taken our Birth and Beyond experiences, which were really extraordinary because they were just so natural and organic with brave women. So the women of Nimbin are incredible. So I guess, well, we had a big life in Lucknow, India, with our master Papaji, and that's where we became Mira and Tansen. Before that, we were Carol and Norman. And one time I met someone who said, "Oh, you're two people. I thought it was Caroline Norman." So it's like it's really crazy. So I just want to say that Tansen is like the most beautiful man in my life. And although he's not in his body anymore, he's like really present with me. And also dissolved in the great unknown that we don't have words for. So that's to remember my beautiful, beautiful partner.
So just listening to everyone and thinking, realising that in this great visionary company, how we've all crossed tracks so many times with Uncle Lyle, with Lorraine Maffey-Williams, with Cole James, with Vernon, everybody crossing in imagining an alternate world together. But I'm really here to do an act of ventriloquism for Mick Lachine beside me. And Mick Lachine, as you all know, was the genius who inspired Bush Video. And I'm now going to read notes that were put together by a lot of members of Bush Video, okay? Okay, so encouraged by Johnny Allen and Graham Johnson, Mick Glasheen and Joseph El-Khoury applied for a grant from the AFI to set up a video community access centre at the Aquarius Festival. While this was a concept that had been talked about in Australia and abroad, it was the first time a centre like this could be set up, offering access to general public to film whatever they found important and newsworthy, anticipating far back in 1973 today's social media networks like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and TikTok. That's from Annie Kelly. So the people we want to remember, Annie says, Mick Glasheen was the heart and soul of Bush Video. He was the bridge between the technical genius of Fat Jack Jacobson, Kenny Beattie, Tommy Barber. Mick put a projector on the top of a geodesic dome, I hope some of you remember this, pointing downwards into a hemisphere mirror. The projected images covered the whole inside of the dome. Onto this surface, films of Yolngu dancers from Arnhem Land. You remember? Great. And the film Uluru, on which we worked, were projected onto a dome for all to see. So the whole dome became this projection, right? So now we want to remember, Johnny Lewis. So Johnny Lewis came from the Yellow House, from the Whale and Dolphin Embassy, one of the founders of Greenpeace, and he was a part of Bush Video. And at that time he was using mainly a Polaroid, I'm told, but he also jumped behind cameras. He was a charismatic visionary who made magical images. What? Oh, the mic? Okay, sorry. Okay, so, do you want to say something about? I just go on. Okay, so Johnny was a charismatic, magical visionary who created images that will endure forever. Tommy Barber was, I think, a genius too, and what a joy to work with him. Now, Tommy, this is his own notes from Eileen Barber, who is his partner, who is here. So she gave me some notes of his, and he said, moved to Nimbin, 1973, site manager of light support systems of Aquarius Arts Festival, then architect engineer of Thunderball Falls, assisted Bush Video wiring Nimbin for the first time, a town wired up for the first time in Australia. And Tommy took on the job of looking after latrines because nobody else was doing it. So typical of Tommy, he was a great problem solver. So he took on the job of digging holes for the toilets that nobody else had thought of. Tom gathered volunteers who pothole diggers, and as fast as the holes were filled, they added lime and put Hashin around them, and so they invented the toilets and that whole system, which was absolutely essential to the festival, right? Tom worked on the Tensegrity design project, and he was one of the inventors of wind energy in California. Ariel, where's Jackie Joy Jacobson? Have we missed him? I'll just go back to Jackie. Jackie Joy Jacobson introduced himself to us as a taxi driver from New York, but in fact he was a technological genius, and any kind of dream that any of us had, he would invent the technology to make it possible. So Fat Jack worked out how to wire Bush Video from the Dome to the Rainbow Cafe. The idea was to project images shot in real time. When the images did not arrive, Fat Jack built amplifiers so that the images could be seen. So he ran cable to the cafe from the Bush Video premises. He also built the amps. So from the dome that Mick and Tommy built, they wired up the whole town and made simultaneous vision possible. And somewhere there are those films. We'd all love to see them again. So please join me in saluting Bush Video.
Interestingly, as Juno said, this was the first time a town had been wired up for closed circuit video in the whole of Australia. The first telecast was actually The Birth of a Baby by Mary Marvel. So we were already one up. I don't think we killed anybody, Graham. So that was a wonderful way to start. And Bush Video played a wonderful role in opening up anyone who wanted to become a reporter. Simply took out a half-inch black and white porter pack and reported on the festival. And Mick Lachine and Stephen Jones and others have preserved all that material to this day. It's an outdated technology now. No one has half-inch black and white videos anymore. But it was a wonderful recording of the festival. What's now your favourite part of the show, which is interval. So what we'll invite you to do is go out to the kitchen. If you ordered a vegetarian meal, there'll be one for you. If you ordered a meat meal, there'll be one for you. About 30 minutes' time, we'll resume. Graham and I will bore you with a little bit of the philosophy of the festival, and then we'll have a few more presentations from key movers and shakers. Thank you, enjoy the interval, and enjoy your food. Ladies and gentlemen, would you mind taking your seats, please? Shortly we'll go on with the second part of the show. So please take your seats, ready for the second part. Just put them there, they're going to come and clear them. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to start by just clarifying something, because there's been a little bit of confusion about it, and that is the roles of Graham and I in the festival. Please sit down. Those at the back, please sit down. We're about to go on with the show. Graham and I knew one another at the University of New South Wales, and unbeknown to one another, when they advertised for a director of the festival and a director of the Aquarius Foundation, we both applied for those jobs, unknown to one another. So Graham then became the festival director, with me in my role of director of the Aquarius Foundation, partly responsible for setting up a campus network and partly for producing a biennial festival. So just to explain that a little bit. Graham and I now are going to talk a little bit about the early days of the festival. Sorry, I'll just have to change the PowerPoint. Give me a moment.
Testing.
Okay, can we have a bit of quiet, please? First of all, I'd like to introduce Graham, and Graham's going to introduce me. This is something that Graham sent me a little while ago, and it really struck a chord with me, that the hippies are right. Back then we were seen as fringe dwellers who were, a little bit crazy, a little bit on the edge. But since then, many of our concerns and many of the possible solutions to them have become mainstream. And the world shares the concerns that we had back then about things like climate change, overpopulation, etc. So we're going to just, Graham and I are going to tell you a little bit about how we got involved, and what the philosophy was behind the festival. So first of all, Graham's story. Graham, I know you went from being at Duntroon Military College to being president of the Student Union and editor of Thrunker. That's quite a leap. How did you make that leap?
Working class family in Melbourne. My father was a truck driver, and there were Commonwealth scholarships. I starred at school. I was Duxford High School, but I was army mad. My mother's father had been killed in France. I don't know, it kind of planted something in. And I was a cadet in high school, and they encouraged me to go on. And I ended up with Royal Military College, and what do you say about this? Initiation by fire. I'd never had such an intense experience. Right? It's full-time work, sport, but no thinking. I ran out of steam in the third year and said, I can't do it anymore. I've got to get out of here. But I arrived at university, wanting to get a university engineering degree, depressed, angry at the army, and then Vietnam happened and conscription. So I got kind of radicalised, right? I was so angry at the army. Now I had an excuse to be angry and active about the army and conscription. So that's how I became radicalised. Duntroon taught me how to pass exams. We were always assessed, and I got very good at passing exams, and I had plenty of surplus time to spend on student politics and writing articles in Tharunka. I'd never written until the opportunity of taking Tharunka. I graduated from high school thinking it was all about science, hadn't applied, and then got this opportunity and discovered students with cannabis, my journalism was sparkling, right? And acid, right? And I became very good at doing pamphlets, right? In those days, offset printing had just arrived. We moved, in my time in student politics, from wax plates that you typed, you cut the air and wound the handle, into Gestetner's rodeo. Offset printing, where you stuck things and took a photograph of it to make the plate, right? Sticking things down. This was radical, right? And just introduced, this is, Oz and all those magazines are feeding off this new technology. Well, my thing was flyers, posters you can give to people with an argument on it, with a lovely graphic. So that's where I came skilled from university with two things. Passing exams
and pamphleteering. Thanks, Graham.
And Johnny, I want to know, you appeared in the Tharunka office when I was there. The boy from Tenterfield doing drama, arts drama.
Yes,
how did that happen?
I was a bit of a drama freak in those days. And this is a group that I was in with Juno James, who's here tonight. The Human Body. The Human Body was a group that we set out to try and reinvent rituals for the modern age. Back then, lysergic acid the government had not yet discovered it and made it illegal. And what we used to do, we treated acid as a sacrament. And we would all gather together, we would prepare for it, share an acid trip, and then see where that would take us. Often it took all our clothes off. What back then we called happenings. We'd end up rolling around on the floor with half the audience. But they were wonderful days. And what we tried to do really was to reinvent the theatre, to bring the theatre back into relevance to people's lives. One of the things that was very big back then was rock operas. The Who had written Tommy, which we all admired greatly, and we all set out to create the next great rock opera. Terry McGee, who many people here will know, who was very instrumental in setting up the Tunnable Falls community. Terry rewrote Peer Gynt as Peter Gynt, and he played Peter. Renee Geyer and her band Sun reinvented all of Grieg's music. And we did these productions, we did several of them. We did them as environmental theatre. So the audience would walk from one set to the other. As the set changed and the music changed, the audience would move on to a series of wonderful environments. Mira here played the Queen of the Trolls for me, beautifully in some of those productions. So a little bit theatre mad, but I also then got into running venues. I was handed the keys by Jeff Cantor to what was really Sydney's first alternative music venue, the Arts Factory in Surrey Hills. And basically, I refused to deal with managements. If the bands didn't want to talk directly to me, then I was not interested in them performing in my venue. So it's what today would be called an indie music venue. And every 3 or 4 weeks, I would announce on the stage for a number of weeks. The last weekend we won't be here. We're all going up to the Nutwood Rugs Farm at Ourimbah, and we're going to have a festival and you're all welcome. 800 to 1,000 people would turn up. Would all camp on the fields. Magic mushrooms were plentiful. And you would walk from campfire to campfire, sharing a joint, sharing a bit of music, sharing comradeship. Graham came to one of those little festivals, and in a way that became one of the models for the Nimbin Aquarius Festival. That more informal, round the campfire, sharing without all the paraphernalia of, the big mechanical rock scene. I think fair enough, Graham, to say that was one of the inspirations.
That we were in reaction to Woodstock, right? Woodstock claimed to represent the counterculture. We were trying, that's not what we want. We don't want main stage entrepreneurs putting up barbed wire fences around their gates. It was terrible. The Ourimbah festivals were just appalling for me. So that was part of it. We bring people together and create community, right? Build community. Focus not on the rock stars, right? On people who wanted to do stuff.
So the other thing I think to remember is that this was a time of radical change. Don't forget that the festival was 73. The Whitlam government came into power after 23 years of Conservative rule in 72. And there was a feeling, a whiff of revolution in the air is the best way I can describe it. There'd been the student riots in Paris. Germaine Greer had written The Female Eunuch. Dennis Altman, an Australian, had published Homosexual Oppression and Liberation, first of all in New York. And there was a lot of ferment, there was a lot of change and openness to change. Graham and I felt that we were able to go and knock on the doors of some of the Whitlam ministers. We got a welcome, we were allowed in, we had interesting conversations and sometimes a lot of assistance.
I remember the day we spent, the story's moved up to Johnny and I working together. I remember the day we spent in the Australia Council offices in North Sydney. The Australia Council had been a creation of the Whitlam government, and we spent a day there walking around the different boards. It's structured with music boards, theatre board, and talking to the officers, the personnel, each with their own story, yeah? And came away with bucket loads of money, Johnny.
Yeah, we did. That was the whole point.
And Philip Petit is here tonight. We went into the music board and asked, what was his name? James Murdoch, who'd just come back from Paris. He was the music board, and we said, what do you think we should have at this festival? He said, well, I just come back from Paris. I saw this most amazing street theatre performer, Philip Petit, did this money. He said, that sounds great, that's suitable. Okay, he says.
We'll arrange his fare for you.
Yes. He wrote the grant application and funded it. I think he arranged the airfares, didn't he?
He did.
He did the whole works. Those were the days of grant applications.
So there was all this ferment going on, and in a way, the Aquarius Festival, I think, sort of ran off the back of that. We didn't, it was wider than just us. The whole North Coast movement was wider than us. But I think the Aquarius Festival gave it a focus, helped it to grow, and helped it to prosper. Amongst the things happening at the time were the various liberation movements, including the Aboriginal land rights movement, which happened alongside things like the Aquarius Festival. And I think it was that climate of openness to change, radical thinking, that made the festival possible and made it what it was. Just some of those movements. The female eunuch. I've been criticised a little bit with tonight's program for saying, look, you know, there are more men than women. Why is that? I don't know why that was, but all I know is that at the time, not just the counterculture, but Australian society was fairly male-oriented. Not that there weren't some wonderfully powerful and wonderful women involved, because there were. But we never knocked back anyone that came forward. If you came forward and you wanted to volunteer, you were welcomed with open arms. But I think it's true enough to say, Graham, that there was a preponderance of men. Why that was the case, I think some of those changes to do with women's liberation, gay liberation, the ideas were in the atmosphere, but they hadn't yet come through to make it possible for women and gay people, speaking as a gay man. Yes. So I think, as I say, we didn't cause a lot of that change, but we probably did help to speed it up. That's Dennis Altman's book at the time.
Can I?
Yes.
My theme is that by chance or fate, I ended up as editor of the Tharunka again and devoted the year into sociology research. What was coming out of the counterculture, you know? So we had theme editors. And Harry Freeman did anti-psychiatry. Where are you hiding from Harry, for example? With psychedelics was an issue. Anti-war, of course. I think John Geek did Whole Foods. But this week, each edition had a guest editor with a different theme on the counterculture. I say this. Outside campus, the paper wasn't being directed anymore so much as students. People took it home and shared it instead of around. The student press was the background of the radical independent press at the time.
Yes.
So so when it came to theming the festival and who do we talk to about invaded counterculture, we had this great introduction. We've drawn out a lot of ideas and people who are doing this stuff in Sydney.
Right. So one of the first things with Graham and I, we both sat opposite one another in our US offices in Melbourne and said, what the fuck do we do now? So we got out our address books and we started just contacting our friends. And one of the first things we did was to write a manifesto, which is what every revolutionary does. So we tried to, Graham and I had both been at the 1971 Aquarius Festival in Canberra, at the ANU campus, which was modelled on the Adelaide Festival model. People sitting in serried rows, watching dance, watching concerts. We thought, look, given the times, that's not the model that we want to go with. So we wrote a manifesto to try and turn that on its head. We said, let's invent the whole festival form. So do you want to say a little bit, Graham, about the manifesto? What things stood out for you in that manifesto?
Beyond consumerism was, I think, the first thing we know. Make the festival our own. Not about making money. Woodstock, right? It's about creating community. Art creating community. So the other thing I remember was the production. It was a pamphleteering effort for me. And what was amazing, that we had this conversation and we had the manifesto printed by the afternoon.
Yes. We only had copies, yes.
In the AUS print department. They had great machinery
Yep.
there.
A couple of other points that I remember from the manifesto. One was that we do not need to be sold our own culture. We were kind of reacting against that whole kind of commercialisation of the counterculture which seemed to be happening all around. Another one was participation. One of our slogans, if you like, was, there is no program, you are the festival. You're not coming here to sit and watch, great performers on a stage. You're coming here to make the festival your own. We encouraged people to come in self-sufficient tribal groups, and many people took us at our word. We saw earlier Blurter and how they got their bus together and came over. So that manifesto became, if you like, a philosophical base for the festival, which Graham and I sort of, used very much like waving a flag, saying this is what it's about. If you're interested, come and join us. If you're not, forget it. So the next thing was gathering the energy. And what happened was that at that point in time, I was running a campus circuit. So often I would be in Perth on a Monday, Adelaide on a Tuesday, and North Queensland by Friday. Graham would come and join me in Barstone. We would try and identify all of the movers and shakers in that particular city, whether it was people running a macrobiotic restaurant, writing wonderful poetry, putting out great publications. Yes, whatever, what we called, we set out to gather together the best minds of our generation. So we got pretty adept at throwing chicken curry dinners for 30 or 40 people. Graham would stand up and give a rave about the festival. Paul Joseph would sing a couple of songs. Half the people would get up and say, 60s hippie bullshit, and walk out. There'd be 10 people sitting there saying, sounds great, when do we start and what do you want us to do?
I don't think we were sitting there. Paul Joseph used to have us dancing, right, at the meeting, singing anthems. We were away with it. Cannabis soup.
So these are just some of the people that we toured. Spike Milligan, who in addition to being a great comic, was a great environmentalist. Phil Oakes and Ron Cobb, who were sort of, part of the old guard in the United States. The White Company, which we mentioned a little bit, and as members of the White Company here tonight. We set up the White Company, Paul Joseph and myself and many others, with the idea of a model. We were saying to people as we toured the campuses, we toured communes up and down the coast, and we basically said, this is the way we would like you to come to the festival. Come as self-sufficient groups, look at what you've got to offer in terms of performance, etc. And the White Company became a little bit of a proselytiser, if you like. This is Ahmed, a wonderful Moroccan acrobat who was part of the White Company. And then, of course, became the search for a site. Once we had decided, when Graham and I took on the task, we were meant to do the 73 festival on the Melbourne University campus. And we looked at what was going on and thought, no, that's not going to work for us. What we'd like to do is to go to a rural community. I always imagined the wonderful beachside somewhere in the north coast, south of the Queensland border, because that was Jelgi Peterson territory. And we had a period of looking, far and wide. Somehow we could never find the right site. There was always something lacking. The water wasn't sufficient. The road access wasn't good enough. And eventually, Graham, how did we settle on Nimbin and the idea of recycling a town? What's your memory of that?
Exhaustion driving around the north coast. And also, the issue was it came to Nimbin, another day I spent looking at properties that weren't suitable. And it's not as if, the people had their hands up saying, come to my place and all this. It was hard work finding these places and then getting there and being disappointed. In Nimbin, I report back to Cole James. I've been disappointed again on the site I looked at. He says, why don't we look at a place that's already got infrastructure? Look at a showground or something like this. It was the Arimba business, Johnny, the greenfield site of festivals, that we should go there. Cole James, thank you, Cole, said, look for infrastructure. That was the Nimbin Showground. I went down and got the number. That began the process that led to the town meeting.
And I should say, this is quite interesting, that the year before, Nimbin had been featured on the ABC Four Corners as a dying town. The industries were dying, the young people were leaving, the dairy industry had fallen apart, the timber industry was in the doldrums. So when we actually then sort of identified Nimbin, it became, can we bring life back to this community? Can we bring young people back again? And we actually felt that the main thing we could do was to, first of all, we thought this is a beautiful site. There's something about the Nimbin Rocks and the whole township that just, won our hearts. But we thought, well, we better ask the town. So do you want to talk a little bit, Graham, about the famous town meeting where we literally asked the town, do you want us or not?
We won. We came to town. There were two processes. Having made the telephone call, arranged the meeting, Cole James and Johnny drove to, and Tom Zabriskie drove to Nimbin from Sydney to meet with the president of the Show Society outside the War Memorial at the end of the street. We parked outside the post office and walked down the middle of Cullen Street towards these two grey-haired guys waiting for us there. No cars in the street, no traffic. It was like some Western movie with these awnings.
There was a dog asleep in the middle of the road and an old man on a rocker. So we thought, yep, this is our kind of town.
And the Show Society guys said, oh, what you're talking about is too big for us. We'll have to have a town meeting to get a pro, and offered to chair the town meeting. So that meant coming back to Nimbin again, this time with reinforcements. And the reinforcements were, I mentioned that, Harpo, with Bomber Perrier. But they also had movies. They were projecting 8mm movies on the, just weird stuff, but a lot of goodwill. Anyway, we had the support of Bob Marsh, the constable. He was entrepreneurial. He had a vision. He had a business down at the old butter factory where he was cutting up dead cows for pet food, So he was looking for job opportunities. I had a great admiration for him. He liked the idea. He couldn't be there, but he wrote a letter. This turned out to be the trump card at the meeting. We had a lot of goodwill, but when Bob Marsh said, in effect, it's a golden opportunity, there's nothing to worry about, safety or anything like that, seize this one. We had the support of the town.
I think Bob wrote in that letter that this is an opportunity which won't come again. This is an opportunity we should grasp with open arms. So when we did eventually take a vote, I think, Graham, there wasn't a single abstainer.
I think there were a couple.
All right.
Yeah, I could. But basically, fundamentally. So this was, it was an agreement with the town to produce this event. So there was a sports day as part of it, right?
Yes.
Organised by the Bogan Sports Club. But as we approached the festival, all the volunteers, the town contribution kind of got swamped, right? It manifested on the last day, on the sports day, on the Saturday, with the tug-of-war team and Philip Petit on the rope.
Yes.
Yeah. So the other thing, suddenly we had a site. This is my learning about events production. You don't have an event until you've got a time and a place for it, right? So we'd been bouncing. I felt, as director of the festival, getting nowhere, bouncing around, no progress on the event I was supposed to, until we had Nimbin. But once we had Nimbin lined up, we had the whole of AUS lined up. So it wasn't just the Aquarius Foundation working on it. It was the guy from ABSCOL, so the Aboriginal group, organising for us. Who else? Organised the train, right? Are we going to talk about that now?
Yes, we'll talk. David's going to talk about it in some detail a bit later.
Okay. So the best minds of our generation, capable of organising anything, took it up, you know, giving us support. I came to Nimbin, right, after the... How fast are we progressing?
Okay, yep.
Yeah? So the next, having secured the site, we went back for the annual meeting of the Australian Union of Students to do our presentation. Well, there, as a performance from the White Company, with Paul Joseph singing the songs, and we swamped. I met people years after who said that they worked in the advertising industry, but never have they seen such a powerful presentation, right? Of joy, right? We had everyone with us on this. They didn't even ask us for a budget, right? It was open slather for us on the AUS finances, which is how we got the train and things like that.
Indeed. We also got an amazing support from the architecture schools, both at Sydney University and New South Wales University. We talked earlier about the role of Cole James and Bill Lucas. They both ran architecture studios, and they took on the job of helping us to design and build all the structures. We needed toilets, we needed saunas, we needed showers, we needed bridges, we needed domes, and they took that on with relish. There were dozens and dozens of those students, all led by those two great thinkers and leaders, and they basically...
champions.
Yeah, champions, and basically built the festival site for us.
Well, so the record of that, the students' report when they went back to university, is now in Nimbin. I've never seen it before, but it's a meticulous collection of drawings and the infrastructure that was there. It tells you how many toilets were constructed and things like that. It's down the community centre. Let me recommend people who are interested in that story of the architects. That's the information. Just arrived in Nimbin today.
Right, and they were very innovative. They discovered, for example, that bamboo was a plentiful material and very flexible, and you could tie it together with string. So a lot of these wonderful structures were just thrown up almost overnight using local natural materials. And I have to say that as a result of their efforts, the site looked and felt beautiful. So this is on the right is Graham's residence during the festival. Remember that teepee, Graham?
I do remember that teepee.
I remember sleeping on the floor of the teepee. And I think one of your daughters was in fact conceived in that very teepee, if I'm not wrong.
That's softly side. And she designed that hippies were right banner you saw at the beginning of this. So the Aquarian daughter, conceived at the Aquarius Festival, born an Aquarian, giving art back to Nimbin.
So that's a little bit of a picture of the train. We'll mention briefly the train. We had this wonderful, once we had decided on Nimbin, we had all sorts of crazy ideas. Back then you could have those crazy ideas. One idea was we were going to get the Army or the Navy to supply a big battleship cruiser for us, and we were going to bring people up the coast on the cruiser. Never happened, but we did manage to charter a train, the Good Times Express, which started from Melbourne, went through Sydney and brought people. David Hallett was on that journey and is going to tell us a little bit more as we go. Just a few more pictures to give you a feel. There was very humorous, light-hearted touch, and people just, that lovely sort of signpost, someone just made that overnight and stuck it up. Graham and I weren't sort of, we were kind of there as a backstop, but people took over. They made the festival their own. We've talked a little bit about Vernon Treweek and the painting of the town. This is a lovely, one of the things that then happened over a couple of years was an interesting dialogue between the old settlers and the new settlers. And this is a depiction by Vernon Treweek of just how the image changed from the old settlers through to the new settlers. Bush video, again, we've talked about a little bit, just how radical that was and how important to the communication of the festival. Do you want to say, Graham, a little bit about the learning exchange and Danny Torsch and what that was all about?
Who was what's his name? Deschooling. What was his name?
Ivan Illich.
Ivan Illich, right. This was a spin-off from Ivan Illich's tour, and not having a program. Ivan Illich said, what we don't need, we just need to link people up. We don't need schools. Link up people who want to teach with people who want to learn, right? The learning exchange concept of a school. So that's what we practice. And Danny Torsch, who at the time was the education vice president for Australian Union of Students, came up and organised this learning exchange. Yeah, so that's...
Thank you, Graham. I'm going to talk a little bit about performers. We basically said to people, there is no program, you are the festival, but we also seized it quite a bit. I wrote letters to people all over the world, telling them what was going to happen and inviting them. People like Jerry Rubin wrote back and said, lovely idea, but I'm too busy. Love to come, but I can't. Purnadas Baul in Calcutta wrote me a lovely letter saying, I extend my hand across the ocean with a friendly joint. So he had to be there. So some of the performers that I think added a lot to the festival. One was Dollar Brand, who was Bajo Stone's kind of musical guru and otherwise. The Stone family were a Kalahari Bush family from South Africa who'd been very radical in South Africa, and Bar took it on himself to basically round up Aboriginal elders from all over Australia, which he did quite successfully. And Dollar Brand was very central to that. I'm told, I learned from Wendy Champagne today that for the first couple of days, our stages were very small and light. We didn't want big stages with fences around them. So the stages were small. Dollar needed a piano. And somewhere in about day 3, we found one of those old iron stand-up pianos, lugged it onto the stage, and Dollar was able to perform. A magical performer. This is Philippe Petit. He came to fame, first of all, by his walk between the Twin Towers of Notre Dame in Paris, and that's where we were told about him. As soon as I heard about him, I think Graham and I both felt, yeah, we want him at the festival. And of course, a year later, he went on to walk between the Twin Towers in New York and become part of history. Often referred to as the Blondin of his generation, and that walk between the Twin Towers is sometimes called the artistic crime of the century. Martin Sharp, the Sydney artist, basically was repairing Luna Park at the time, and he came up with the lovely statement that the spirit of Nimbin conquers the spirit of the Industrial Revolution, when Philippe walked between the pylons of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. So an amazing performer. I think everyone went away from the festival with very fond memories of Philippe. Graham mentioned the tug-of-war, and there's Philippe. As soon as Philippe saw a rope stretched or a wire stretched, he was onto it. So, no sooner had the tug-of-war teams put the rope between them than Philippe was up there doing his juggle. This is the walk between the pylons. Next week, interestingly enough, it's the 50th anniversary of that, and I'm organising a whole program of events in Sydney just to celebrate that wonderful, the conquering of the spirit of the Industrial Revolution. This is Philip on the Twin Towers in New York, one of the more amazing events of the century. People may not know Philippe's name, but you've only got to say the man who walked between the Twin Towers in New York. Everybody knows the story. It was the subject of the Academy Award-winning documentary, Man on Wire, and as a real tribute to Philip's great and wonderful skills. So we've touched a little bit on the drug bust. For the first couple of days of the festival, and I think Graham would agree, every time I walked onto the site, people invited you to sit down at their campfire, to share some music, to share some food, to share a joint. And I remember thinking, life doesn't get much better than this. If the rest of my life is like this, I'll be pretty happy. And then on about day 5, we had an agreement with the local cops, local police, that basically said, look, as long as you can maintain law and order, we will stay out of your hair. You know, it's up to you. Then when they got a report that there'd been a rape of a 13-year-old girl and a heroin dealing in one of the tents, they felt they had to act. So as soon as they came onto the site, that was the signal for a lot of the student radicals to do their thing. And for a little while it was touch and go. Within 24 hours, one side of the street was lined with the riot squad, the 21st squad, and the other side of the street was lined with radicals waiting to see who would throw the first punch. It was very tense for a couple of days there. The wise people on the site just withdrew to their tents and their camps and said this will all blow over. But Graham, you've already talked about it a bit this afternoon, but do you want to tell us a little bit about the drug bust and the impact that it had on the festival?
It brought the 21st Division to town. These were the cops. They didn't wear armour, they were thugs. They wore gym shoes. And within minutes of them coming on duty in the street, they were making arrests for trivial things like bad speech, sitting in Cullen Street, sitting on the pavement in Cullen Street. They were preparing, I reckon, they were preparing for a bust. This is my story. Johnny was a witness to this. I got really concerned. Right? They wanted to create a riot. We'd created peace in Nimbin. They wanted to make it look like a riot. And so I organised a meeting with the Superintendent of Police and the guy, the inspector who was in charge of the operation in the Nimbin Police Station. Johnny was there, the guys from AUS were there, and I had the foresight to invite Dave Smith, one of the local landowners who had been giving us a lot of support. Anyway, this was a tense meeting, and we're saying to the cops, if you go onto the field, there's going to be a riot and people are going to get hurt. Oh no, we've got rights to do this. So the next person would give their argument to the cops. Same thing. Got round to Dave Smith. Dave, what do you think if the police go onto the fields tonight? And Dave Smith says, I think there'll be property damage.
And that won the day.
Instantly, the police changed their position. And when we stepped out of that meeting, the yard was, we'd gone on there in dusk and now it was dark. There was at least 60 cops, uniformed cops, waiting to do this raid. It didn't happen. Yeah?
I had a bit of a problem at this time because I'd attended so many meetings and whatever that I literally got laryngitis and lost my voice. I couldn't talk. So I thought, you know what, how can I make a difference to this situation? And I knew I had the 6 barrels of Bengal in Calcutta ready to hop on a plane. But those days getting visas for itinerant Indian musicians was no easy task. And so I ran into Judith Wright, the great Australian poet, who was at the festival, and explained the situation to Judith. She gave me this card saying, this man can help you. And the card was for Dr. Nugget Coombs, the head of the Reserve Bank.
Her lover at the time, we learned in history.
Yes, later on we learnt that they were lovers. So I flew down to Canberra, walked into Nugget Coombs' office, was admitted straight away. He had this spread out on, had a beautiful big oak desk with this spread out in front of him. 3,000 riot, 5 police beaten. He sat back and said to me, I know who you are, what do you want? So a little bit of Indian musicians need visas, etc. He picked up the phone, Coombs here. I had the visas in my pocket before I left the building. So we were getting support at all sorts of amazing, amazing levels. So this is how the Barrels of Bengal were an extraordinary group. Allen Ginsberg, the great American poet, had gone to India in search of Rabindranath Tagore, the great Bengali poet. And what he discovered was this wonderful... The Barrels were the travelling gypsies of India. They went from village to village. When the Bals arrived, everybody down tools and had a festival. And so that was very appropriate that they come to Nimbin. When they did come to Nimbin, they recognised, they said, this is just like a Balmela back home.
Johnny, this was inspired. You know, we have a riot or a potential riot. We managed to talk it down. Who has ever heard of going overseas and inviting a musical group to come in? Yeah. What was its genius? Where did this spring from?
Where did this spring from? I sort of had an interaction with a lot of entrepreneurs, etc. Clifford Hocking, one of the entrepreneurs, told me about the Bals, and he said, I've always wanted to bring them to Australia because I think they're amazing, but it's not a very commercial thing. So I immediately picked up my ears. Okay, give me their address. And as I say, Pernodus wrote me this beautiful letter. They had become internationally famous. They toured London for the Rolling Stones. Some of you will know the Bob Dylan, John Wesley Harding LP. That's the Bells of Bengal on the front cover of the LP. So they were they were part of that international movement, and I thought it was very appropriate that they come to Nimbin. And I did. It was interesting because with all the effort to get them here, they arrived into Brisbane. All 6 of them. Laxman Dasbal, who was Pernodus's brother, brought a lump of hashish as a present, which of course is what you did when you're into festivals in India. So he went straight into prison in Brisbane. And I got a phone call from the prison saying, we've got this crazy man, he doesn't speak any English, he sits up and sings all night, we don't know what to do, can you come and collect him? So I did, and I still have the charge sheet to this day. But basically on the last night of the festival, there was a lovely full moon. The Bals did their first concert, which was amazing, and somehow peace and serenity had been restored.
The festival had been challenged, and for a lot of people, a lot of the radicals at the time, we'd failed, with not challenging the police on the ground, and they left. Right? There was a whole exodus. But our focus was on holding the peace, and and what happened for the 21st Division? They mellowed when there was nothing to arrest and all that kind of stuff. They began enjoying themselves in Nimbin, and we had invited them to put a team in for the tug of war, remember? And they wanted to do it, but they were told by their bosses they couldn't do it. Anyway, that was the feeling that came out of this decision not to chase down the confrontation line, but to pursue the Aquarian dream, surrender to
So we're going to talk a little bit now about the Aquarius legacy. After the festival, the big question became, after Nimbin what? Where do we go from here? And Graham sort of retired back to Uralla. This is a lovely letter that he sent me, and Graham and Viatul at Uralla. But the Aquarius legacy was many and varied. So I'm going to ask Graham to speak to, what came out of Nimbin, what were some of the results, and how did this help change the whole... In fact, the Rainbow region then has assumed quite an identity, largely as a result, I think, of the festival. So, Graham, here are a few of the images which might jog your memory. What does this suggest to you?
A lot of activism descent. We were an activist culture.
Okay, thanks.
And it's not only have we defended it here, so the Battle of Terania Creek is considered the great turning point. For me, this was the proving of the strength of the Nimbin community and around to take on the cops. We were 4 weeks in the forest. We had been activists before we came to Nimbin, but now we'd produced 10 years, 73 is the festival, 79 is the Battle of Terania Creek. And we'd started with division, but we had built community so strong, right? that we could take on the forestry and the cops for 4 weeks, sustain an operation. And the cops and the forestry people would leave saying, oh, we'll be back, there'll be an inquiry. But we held the land, yeah? We held the ground. And this is my military training. It says, when is a battle won? When there's no opposition to you holding the ground, right? It's your ground. No one's going to remove you. That's how it was after Terrania.
And things like Mardi Gras, which we also had, I think, a major impact on the way festivals were conducted from then on. Lifestyle festivals, down to earth in Canberra with Jim Cairns and Junie Morosi. The Woodford Festival, which in many ways I think was the inheritor of a lot of the Nimbin ideas. We did really, I think, manage to change somewhat how festivals were conceived. And
let's just contemplate. It's always called the Whitlam government, yeah? He was the Prime Minister, but Jim Cairns was the heart of the government. He organised the big crowds in opposition to the war. He eventually turned the ALP against the war. And he came, after he'd been Treasurer, and they turned on the US alliance, wanted to get rid of him, he became a hippie, right? He saw the light. The hippies were right.
Indeed. Okay. That's enough for Graham and I for now. What I would invite you to do is just go to the kitchen and collect your dessert. There's some beautiful cheesecakes and other choices. Come back to your table. Then we'll hear from a few other people who were central in carrying on the festival legacy. So grab your dessert. We'll resume in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Smith.
Good day, Harry.
You've used a lot of my photographs.
Right.
Please give me credit.
Okay. I try to whenever I can. A lot of those photographs came to me via all sorts of,
but they're still copyrighted.
Sure. And if you'd like at some stage, I'll send you a copy of it. You can tell me which ones you want to make. I did try to, but I was getting stuff sent to me.
I understand that. A lot of them were credited, but none of mine.
Oh, sorry about that.
And that's what I
So
see.
basically, I went back to all of the presenters, people like John Shipton, Tom Smith, and they all sent me photos. I asked them to tell me if they knew the photographer. A lot of the time it's but I did think, for a photograph to be on the screen for 20 seconds to acknowledge kind of Aquarius elders is probably good. Sometimes I think you've just got to be prepared to go with it. But if you, I think I've got your email address.
Yes,
I'll make sure that...
Well, you can get them on Flickr.
Yeah.
Okay, there are my photographs there on the Flickr.
Because I can't tell, I know some are Paul White's photos, but I've seen your name many times, but I'm not okay enough to let them say
What I also have, there are only about 30 photographs on Flickr, but I've got about 150 more. I know you know this person. I've got a really bad back. They were the Aboriginal that you invited from the islands, I think.
Black Allen?
No. Anyway, what I'm saying is I have got a lot more photographs which may be of interest to you.
Now I think it's time to bring all that together. You know Greg Hall?
I have spoken to him this afternoon.
Greg has taken on board the task of, and we're in communication with the State Library, the National Library, the local councils, etc. Once all this material is assembled, what our view is, this is the right
I think so, absolutely. The pictures that are on Flickr of mine were just my view sometime. Now, since the entrance, I've revisited. Thank you. And I'd like to contribute then. Under creative commons, yeah.
Why don't we communicate, as the time is limited tonight, but why don't we communicate in the coming days? And certainly people like the State Library are happy to pay for it.
Oh, I don't want that. I just want the recognition.
So we can communicate. I go back to Sydney tomorrow, but I'll contact you.
That's wonderful. And I must say, congratulations on this event.
Thank you.
It's really been wonderful.
I thought it was important to recognise so many of those.
Amazingly put together. Welcome.
Thank you.
So you're going to act the function. Give me an email there. It'll be a very late night as we do our thing.
Yes.
Very late night.
It will be a little bit, yeah.
And I mean, that's okay, but I don't know that we should be tapping people. This has been such a powerful night, and the things that have been said, we're pretty much trivia compared to that. And I'm just wondering whether we shouldn't call it off, or at least halve it.
I'll go with your whatever you feel about that. We're going to, when we resume, we're going to have a few more speakers, but because yours does run for quite some time, it might win. So, but I'll go with whatever you would like to do.
I just talked to Shabir, we either should halve it, and stop the film halfway through. He sings the song, and I speak for 3 minutes in the middle, or we drop it tonight.
Your choice. I'll go with whatever you decide.
Do it tomorrow or the next day.
Yep.
That's possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would invite you to take your seats. We're going to resume in a moment. I know it's been a bit of a long night and there's not much further to go, but we do want to pay a salute to a few of the people that are still around and still movers and shakers here in Nimbin. This festival is not just about what happened 50 years ago, it's also about the 50 years of development that's happened in Nimbin ever since, and some of the people who were so central to all of that. So if you'll bear with us, we will now continue. Please sit down because we're going to have our next speaker in a moment. Benny, you'll need a microphone.
Where would you like to do it from?
I can do it from here. Good evening. I rang up Renee, Katie Corkett's daughter. Katie Corkett is comfortable, and I first tell a bit of a story. She's had a number of falls, and she has an aneurysm, and she's there's no hope for it. It's amazing she survived this far, and still alive. So she's just with family at the moment, and anyway, Katie kept the archives of the Aquarius Festival. I mean, she's a librarian background, but she was very dedicated to the whole Aquarian spirit, meaning that there was no commercialism involved with the Nimbin Aquarius Foundation. She took up when Paul Joseph left off for a while, she took it up to establish the Nimbin Aquarius Foundation Incorporation, Nimbin Aquarius Foundation Incorporated. She formed the incorporation, which kept five yearly Aquarius festivals going up till this time. So now this has been an amazing event because it expanded into the community. It got beyond combined with that incorporation. So hopefully this will overtake the appalling situation here with what I'm going to say, abuse through drug taking and this festival. I don't want to get too far because there's a lot of people who feel so religious about dope smoking, but in actual fact, what we have here is quite a sick thing, a cancer happening in Nimbin, and I hope it moves into Aquarius rather than a festival for social change, rather than consuming, sickening, and making this world sick, really. Anyway, I just want to say that Katie's still with us, and she's been wonderful for me personally. She's the mama of Aquarius. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie, unfortunately, can't be with us physically tonight, but she has nominated Winiata to represent her.
Yes. Winiata.
Winiata's going to now do a wonderful song dedicated to Katie.
I'm really, really honoured at this moment to represent a dear friend. Yes, the daughter is sitting with Katie now, and probably her partner too. So I'm really honoured to sing one song. It's one of Katie's favourite songs, and we sang it a lot up at Mount Nardi. So if I could have someone to hold this microphone, and yeah. Cool thing. I haven't sang this song for a long time. I think it was Rene Gaillard who wrote this, but I only do first and second verse. Day after facing world of strangers, where I don't belong, I'm not that strong. It's nice to know that there's someone I can turn to, who will always smile. It's so worthwhile. Oh, when there's no getting over that rainbow. Oh, when my smallest of dreams won't come true. I can't take all the madness the world has to give, and I won't last a day without you, without you. Oh. So many times when the city seems to be such a lonely place, yes, a lonely place. It's nice to know that there's someone I can turn to who will always smile. It's so worthwhile. Oh, when there's no getting over that rainbow. Oh, when my smallest of dreams won't come true. I can't take all the madness the world has to give, and I won't last a day without you, without you.
Thank you, Winiata. You can see why that would have been one of Katie's favourite songs, if not her favourite. Another person, to Katie. And everything she's contributed over 50 years. A wonderful contributor. Another person who has been a major contributor here in Nimbin over the years is Dave Hallett, the poet of Nimbin, who has basically brought this hall to life back after the Aquarius Festival. We've mentioned a couple of times the amazing Good Times Express, which was a chartered train from Melbourne that brought hundreds of students from Melbourne and Sydney. David was on that train from Sydney up to Lismore. I'm going to ask David to recollect a little bit for us. What was that amazing journey like? David Hallett, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, John. Thank you. I'll be brief. I'll just say something about the train and about the School of Arts and a very, very short poem. It was on back when universities and schools had 4-term years. It was the breakup day, a Friday, and I got home from Sydney Uni, where I was doing postgraduate studies, to my student digs in Balmain. And my friends in the student digs said, "Get ready quickly, we're going to Nimbin. There's a train leaving in an hour and a half." So I grabbed not nearly enough stuff for camping, even though I was a Boy Scout and was used to camping. I arrived at Central Railway Station with not nearly enough to keep myself warm, tented and all of those sorts of things, and got on this train. They'd bussed over students from Adelaide to Melbourne and then trained them from Melbourne to Sydney, and then the Nimbin Good Times Express, which was about the oldest, most seemingly dilapidated, wondrous train with the old school little compartments in it. Now, very quickly, things deconstructed in the train. People started taking the light bulbs out for starters. Then we all had kerosene lanterns and candles. So suddenly the train was this lit thing with lanterns, and then people started pulling the seats out and putting the seats up where the racks were. And deconstruction happened at great pace. And because people were smoking, the whole thing had this eerie, strange lit thing. And then people started painting some of the windows with watercolours and things. So the train was this myriad, fascinating thing, chugging along smoky and dark and painted and with sarongs and things hanging everywhere. But as we went on through the night, because it quickly fell into night, I noticed there were increasing numbers of police on some of the stations. as if at Dungog at 3 o'clock in the morning there was going to be a university student revolution. Very unlikely. But this went on through the night, and it actually made you think, what is going on? We weren't going to get off the train. We were having a great time. We had a tiny little bit of cannabis, which was gone by the time we got off the train in Lismore. And when we got to Lismore, there were a lot of police in Lismore as well, just, I don't know, to make sure we were orderly in getting on our buses to come to Nimbin. But the train journey, it had this feeling, why were there all these police there? What was this entity that we, this disparate group of students from here and there in Melbourne and such, who were on this train who came up here? It actually gave some sort of strange bonding, having this crew on the train and getting on the buses and then coming out here and camping and taking mushrooms every day. Oh, that's what I remember doing anyway. I certainly don't remember any cannabis there. And starting to play percussion with Paul Joseph and others, which was a critical changing point of my life. Because I'd started playing the grand piano, which we lovely have here as well in the hall since 1982. Just to say something about the School of Arts, the Nimbin School of Arts, which is where we are, was the first building in Nimbin. There were a few farmers scattered around and about. What they really wanted was something for church services. And the government was giving out funding to new communities for schools of arts to be built. So they thought, all right, we'll get the money for this and we'll build it here, then we'll have somewhere for our church services. But it anchored where the village quickly grew. And quickly there were shops and churches and everything else in a hospital that grew around here. But the School of Arts, when it opened in 1904, was the beginning of Nimbin, or the white man's version of Nimbin, 1904. And I've been the president of the School of Arts here for more than 30 years. And the main aim of the School of Arts is to foster the arts. That is absolutely our credo of what this place is about for us here. I'm just going to finish with a very short poem for everyone. In a pocket, in the room, in the moon, naked in this midnight, love conjures impossible words, forever, always, and never. On pieces of the sky it is written, scratched on sand by sunset lovers, impossible words between ocean and rock. Written in the sweat of love, in the whisper of dreams, carved in stone, in silver and gold, spoken in the softest tones at the break of day and the dawn of night. Impossible words, forever, always, and never. To love and be loved, to love and be loved. That is all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, David, and thank you for all you've done over the years, both for the School of Arts, the Hall, and for Nimbin. You've been a wonderful backbone of so many wonderful events. I've had the pleasure of being to some of them, but I've heard great reports of others. We're now going to finish with just two quite special perspectives on Nimbin. The first is from Sarah Crowe, who many of you will know. She's writing a book at the moment on Byron Bay and the whole Rainbow region. She's been in contact with Graham and I, done some wonderful research, and there's a whole chapter in that book on the Nimbin Aquarius Festival. So to share some of her research and wisdom, ladies and gentlemen, would like to introduce you to Sarah Crowe.
Thank you, Johnny. Just be quick. Thanks, David. That was great. Yes, for those...
Yes, it is.
Oh, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm not used to microphones. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Sarah Crowe, and I actually live in Newport in Sydney at the moment, but I lived in the Byron area for 14 years from 2002 to 2016. And I've been writing a history of the Nimbin Byron area for 20 years, I have to admit. It's a passion project of mine, a labour of love, and I've spoken to Graham and Johnny many times, and several of you here I've been fortunate enough to meet, and I've met some amazing people through my research and learnt a great deal about it all, and been to some amazing events, including this festival this week, which has been terrific. Some really wonderful talks and performances. How I came to write this book was I used to come to Byron on holidays with my then partner, Gavin. And one day I was sitting in a cafe in Byron, I think it was Fast Eddie's, which was a bit of a hippie hangout in the late 90s. And this tall, bearded, good-looking dude, Paul, we just started chatting, and he just, in this marathon session, he just told me all about the major things he was involved with, like the 1973 Nimbin Aquarius Festival, and then setting up the first big Nimbin commune after the festival to continue the experiment in alternative living at Tuntable Falls, and how he sold shares around the country for $200 with Terry McGee and other people. And it was the first legal land sharing community in Australia. Paul said the world, but I'm not sure about that. And then, of course, the building of alternative culture in Nimbin, the flowering of music and arts and home birth and home building and growing food organically and all that amazing stuff. And then the galvanising of the alternative culture to stage the first protest in the world to save the rainforest from logging near Nimbin, which Graham played a very important part in. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing, all these firsts. Someone should write a book about this. It needs to be on the public record, especially for young people coming through who would not understand what had happened. And so I decided to write a book, and it was initially focused on the alternative culture in the Nimbin area. But then over time, actually a few years ago, I thought, well, Byron's so popular now and so cool and trendy. And I thought, well, why is Byron so special? Why is it different to any other beautiful seaside town in Australia, like Noosa or Coffs Harbour or Port Macquarie? And I would argue it is the alternative culture, which was turbocharged by the Aquarius Festival. I mean, there were some early hippies, of course, in Maynarm, a substantial community there, but and the surfers, of course, too, which have some overlap with the alternative culture. But it was really the festival that gave the area a huge shot in the arm, and thousands of mainly young people moved to the area as a result, left the cities and settled wanting to get back to nature and all those things I mentioned. Where was I? Oh, yeah, so I thought I better expand it to the Byron region as well, which really was seeded in many ways by the Nimbin culture, and quite a few, like Tuntable pioneers, moved over to the coast. Some people got tired of the rainforest and ticks and leeches and moved to the coast and started amazing things over there. So it really took off sort of from the early 80s to 2010s, arguably, and it was... yes, the Arts Factory, which was inspired by Johnny's Arts Factory in Sydney, started by a guy called Danny Dopel, who was from a band that Johnny was involved with, Nutwood Rug, and he was a surfer and a US draft dodger and a hippie and a dope smoker and a tequila drinker and everything. But yeah, that played a big part in Byron's early years, and the founding of Blues Fest there, of course, and the Epicentre and the Crystal Castle, and anyway, a huge range of things. I'll put it all on my website, but so I have expanded it. And also I thought, oh, well, I'll have to do a bit about the early years, which paved the way for the alternative culture to come, and a bit about the Aboriginal history of the area and how Aboriginal people lived here for tens of thousands of years sustainably. And so I spoke to a Nyangabal elder called Lois Cook, who was here earlier. She told me some amazing stories. Yes, fantastic. Yes, so I just want to finish by reading a few of my favourite quotes from my section on the Aquarius Festival that capture the spirit of the times and a bit about the impact of the festival. Oh, yeah. mean, the fact is, it was, maybe 10,000 people, or a tenth of a big football match in Sydney or Melbourne, and yet we're still talking about it and celebrating it 50 years later. So the impact was far-reaching. It was the start of social change for the region and Australia, really. It was all centred on this area. So it was really remarkable. And I want to pay tribute to these two brilliant men who conceived the idea and brought it to fruition, of course with Cole James too, and help us. But Graham and Johnny, yeah, I salute you. It was groundbreaking and revolutionary. Brilliant. Yes. Okay, so I've just got some quotes from a festival goer called Gary Lewis, who's passed away, who was a teacher and artist at the time, and he was involved in Aboriginal liaison, going to speak to Uncle Dickie Donnelly out at Woodenbong. And he did his PhD in cooperatives as a result, and became Australia's leading historian on cooperatives, and consulted with government and industry, and ended up moving to Byron sort of to die. Like, he died a couple of years later, but he was so happy to be here finally. But he said, here's some quotes from Gary Lewis. The Aquarius Festival helped draw together many extraordinarily energetic, creative and brilliant people into one place. On any given day, there are up to 10,000 generally young people in this incredibly beautiful natural amphitheatre called the Nimbin region, beneath those glorious hills, the Nimbin Rocks, an indigenous sacred site-charged atmosphere. There was an enormous amount of learning going on among these young people, many of whom were seeking something new and qualitatively different from the post-World War II Cold War climate, living under the shadow of potential nuclear threat that they had grown up with. What I found here was something quite remarkable, he said. I can still resonate with the energy of the people in large numbers, moving about with purpose and a sense of joy and expectation and anticipation. The festival was part of a potpourri of existential influences. I look back on those days as days of sunshine and optimism and the promise of a better future. Many people who were touched by the festival subsequently radiated out throughout Australia and the world. I think it's fair to say that the Aquarius Festival had a very important transmission effect, certainly in Australia and possibly far wider than that. I'll finish with some quotes from Graham that he wrote shortly after the festival. The 1973 Nimbin Aquarius Festival was a seminal culture-making event for Nimbin, the North Coast region, and for Australia generally, he wrote. If there is any inspiration to be gained by remembering Aquarius, it is this. Big changes come when we dare to dream and dare to live our dreams. What we did was create a temporary community with a whole set of countercultural ideals around it and lived them for 10 days together. Many dreams were seeded here, and it's not possible for anyone to understand the full impact of the festival because it was a jewel of so many facets. Graham also wrote that the festival was a brave new world of wonder, ecstasy, creativity and goodwill. Here were our dreams and anything seemed possible to us. It was as if some great doorway in our hearts and minds had opened. It opened a fraction and only for a moment, and we were seared by a light which streamed through and illuminated our lives. Thanks, Johnny and Graham.
Now for our last speaker of the night. We mentioned earlier the tomato sauce building, which became our food distribution point. The other major point was at the showground, where we also distributed food, where people could come and collect food, pay what they could afford, and take away what they needed. And the person who ran that, Ray Taus, is with us here tonight, says that in fact the whole festival changed his life in ways that impacted him right throughout his life. So to tell you a little bit about that wonderful contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, Ray Towse.
Thank you. I feel like an imposter amongst so many illustrious people. I've come from Wajak Noongar Budja, from Perth to Bundjalung country. Bring my respects. Last time I travelled with a Noongar Yamaji man. This time I dropped someone off in Dubbo. I'm going to go fast. If it's too fast, please somebody tell me. I came to Nimbin 1973 because of nothing much. I'd been hitchhiking to somewhere one sunny day in Perth, and the man who was driving was pleased I had a motor licence because he wanted to get one himself that day if he could, and I'd be able to drive him to the police station to ask for the test. They were closed because it was a Saturday, but within a week or two we headed across the Nullarbor. After great picking in the Gawler Valley of South Australia, we dropped in where I'd been living in Sydney before, but ended up in Nimbin, although neither of us was especially keen. Once here, it didn't matter who we were, where we were from, what we looked like, or what we were interested in. In Nimbin, it was easy to be myself. Not that I had much idea what that was. I may have a better idea when I grow up. I found somewhere to sleep in a big building, perhaps out of town on the Lismore Road, and someone to share my swag, but in a few days she vanished further out of town. The showground paddock was busy with people making shelters. I remember a low grass shelter under construction by one young fellow about my age. He was relying on string and bamboo and clumps of grass. I thought it looked good and even practical. I made a rake from timber and nails for collecting grass for shelters. Someone asked me if they could use it, and off it went. Now I make tools for bush regeneration volunteers, as a volunteer. I helped clean out an old chemist shop, somewhere that way. Under the building was dry and lots of good company. It rained a lot. After some weeks I left and accompanied my WA friend way north, but it wasn't long until I hitchhiked back to Nimbin. I had some funny lifts, including with people who had never heard of Perth. They'd heard of Western Australia, I think. Soon I was back here in Nimbin. The festival hadn't yet started. Perhaps that's when I went to volunteer at the fruit shop. I got interested in keeping incoming fresh goods looking good and moving out the door, and in exchange for money it brought in, selling prices must have been a tenth of the prices in the cities. There were some people wanting food for no money, and we had last market's produce for them too. Somehow I became the bag man. I'd be in a crowd up in the main street with festival activity happening right in front of us, hundreds or thousands of us watching or singing, and there'd be a slight ripple travelling along in the crowd, followed by a tap on my shoulder, and an arm would reach over with a calico bank bag or a big paper bag just appearing from nowhere, hand to hand towards me. It would be the takings from the shop, often a few $1,000s in notes, 1973. So I'd shove it in the back of my trench coat, and it'd stay there until the show moved on. Then I'd hand it over in the office next to the Rainbow Cafe because they knew what to do with it. Sometimes I'd take it directly to the co-op, to the bank, to the co-op's account further up the street. It was a busy bank. When the Nimbin truck's motor blew up, they had to hire a truck for the Nimbin driver to keep bringing the produce from Brisbane Market. There was no one to talk to about anything, but I knew rental trucks weren't cheap. I took a closer look in the pricing of the produce and realised that despite being a not-for-profit operation, they'd have to pay for the truck and some produce losses. I started to send information back to Graham Cathcart about shop stocks, what we had plenty of and what we didn't. It made no difference to what arrived the next day, though. If it was cheap in Brisbane, it arrived in Nimbin, whether wanted or not. When the festival was just about to start, there was to be a new wholesale and storage warehouse to be established in the showgrounds pavilion that had just been freshly hired. I was told I was to manage the premises there, so I started going to the pavilion every day. It was winter, and up in the top shop, no one was buying lettuces, but the first delivery to the showground was 160 wooden crates of lettuces. A day or two later, the local government health officers and inspectors from the State Department of whatever it is showed up just to make sure we were meeting health requirements. We had no refrigeration and 160 crates of lettuce getting hot with brown rot dripping off them onto the wooden floor. I got in first and asked the visitation for their advice. They said to restack it with alleyways of air between the crates, which I did, or which we did. I got a letter in the post saying my friend was dead and I could come and pick up the car keys. Hitchhiking was much more common in those days than now, and it must have been nearly 1,000 kilometres to go. So off I went. I brought the vehicle back and used it, it was a station wagon, used it for fruit and veg carting between the warehouse and the town shop. It only took me another 40 years to understand what may have happened to my friend. Intimations on that and some of the previous fears of what might happen in confrontations here. When the festival was over, lots of people said they were staying, buoyed up by the friendships they'd met at Tuntable and other places where they'd stayed for days or weeks. They'd not always come to town after that, but just stayed days at a time, grieving those places, I think. I'd been busy in town and hadn't formed an identity with any of the other locations. What I got from Nimbin. It must have been at Nimbin I learnt about weeds that were edible, and I've not stopped eating weeds since. After Nimbin, I'd trawl back lanes in Perth in winter, picking dark green leaves of mallow to take home and eat, because for quite a while I didn't have a garden of my own. Who knows what I got from Nimbin, other than nits. I'd been myself, though, I think. I'd been myself in Sydney too, I suppose, working for the man, whereas in Nimbin I was working unpaid, but for a real cause. Perhaps it switched me on to real causes. Working for real causes wasn't to get me ahead, it was to get them, us ahead. But that's seeing it from afar, 50 years on. I was surrounded by people and I think I loved that. Nothing, surrounded by the many, counting on the few, feeling the substance of the countryside, embroiled in the joy of togetherness with my mob. My voluntary work in Nimbin suited me, but what did it mean? I don't think I knew anything about meaning or about me, nor did I know much about other people. I'd got away from booze and that suited me, but I didn't know how to look after anyone else. I sent the car back where it belonged and hitched north again. Later I went out for a day's travels, but got offered a ride possibly to Darwin, and within a week of being in tropical sun I was back in WA. From the walking and the harvests of the rain-fed laneway greens, I tried to end my loneliness by travelling out my dreams. When I got back to the city from Nimbin, many people asked me how it had been. I'd been away for quite a while, and I replied that I'd learnt a lot. "Oh, that's good," they said. But I replied that I wasn't so sure, as I'd learnt a lot about people I hadn't wanted to know. There'd been a great deal of theft going on. For some of it, I even knew who had taken money from the Nimbin Co-op. But I found it very, very upsetting to know what was going on. I found it selfish, mean and aggressive. And I still had to deal with the death of a good mate. Afterwards. Before I'd got to Nimbin, I'd started growing organic vegetables, but I was a beginner. I still grow organic vegetables, and I still always mulch them. I used to plant vegetables wherever I stayed, and I stayed in many places, so I guess someone got them. A year after Nimbin, I tried my hand at studying, but didn't understand what was wanted of me. Then I saw a Nganya that a language course advertised and did it. Then went out to the red soil country of dryland WA. From then on, I've continued to get jobs with heart, except very briefly once or twice. I think jobs with heart is what gave me a heart. 3 years after Nimbin 73, I was voluntarily helping people grow vegetables, and in another 2 years I was employed to help people grow organic vegetables. I like working and I like helping other people. It means I've been lucky that since about 5 years after I was first at Nimbin, I've had only jobs with heart. I still work and it's still jobs with heart. I've got 2 main jobs, but it was at Nimbin where I first found myself working full-time but not for money. I think I must have practiced that at Nimbin and it beat anything else I'd ever done. I put all sorts of different types of effort into it and it was fun. For the past 45 years, my jobs have been with good purpose, considerable effort and fun. Until a couple of years ago, I had 20 years living with someone who believed every person should be reaching out for their ideals and making them happen. Now I try to help other people reach for their ideals. I think I learnt a lot from my friend about how to do it. If you've got ideals, reach out for them. Reach out and try. Reach out and dare to take risks. We learn from what we achieve, and we have to get learning just as much from what we try for but don't achieve. To me, that's community development as the response and the responsibility to support individuals in that. Whoops. Sorry, I've got a poem in there, a very brief one as well, and a lost page, which won't be long. Oh dear. Sorry. I think it's worth it for the little poem that's in it. A responsibility to support individuals in that community and for the individuals to support the communities that they live in. Ode to Nimbin 73. I drifted lonely as a cloud to an open world of sharing. I blended gently in the crowd from belief and city tearing until at last I practiced paths that led to greater joy and have lived 5 decades carving ways twixt central core and daring. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been very patient and very tolerant with all of our memories tonight. We are going to have a little coda. There's a couple of amazing musicians that are going to sing a couple of songs, but I know you've been very patient. Anyone who feels that this is the time they'd like to leave, we won't hold that against you. But back in 1973, John Jeffrey, who many of you will know, was a mover and shaker in the alternative scene in Sydney. He ran the Wayside Chapel at King's Cross. He ran something called Stanley Palmer's Culture Palace in Darlinghurst and brought up a group of people from Stanley Palmer's who did a wonderful performance in 73 called Bliss Apocalypse. And John Jeffrey and his Sania Tuma are going to do just a couple of songs from that performance back in 1973. So, ladies and gentlemen, John Jeffrey and Samir Tuma.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. Hello, good evening.
Samir and I came up to Nimbin with a crowd of, 25 people to put a play on. And we'll talk a little bit about the play, but Samir's going to begin by singing a song you all know, but it seems to suit very much, of course, what Nimbin and the Aquarius Festival brought about.
What's that? Yeah, it is actually. That's really good. Yeah, brand new.
Just to say that when the group came up, we came from a drop-in centre, it was called, in Woolloomooloo. And it was an interesting place because it was a mixture of, aspiring alternative people, I suppose you could say, and homeless people and almost homeless people, young people from the Italian community who called themselves the Young Mafia and called us hippie shit. So there was conflict, but often that would be resolved in activities where everybody seemed to do things together. But I suppose it was the arty or theatrical aspiring young people that brought the play. And the play, yeah. And the play was actually a play, it was a scripted play written in Berkeley, California in 1970 by a fellow called Daniel Moore, who converted to Sufism about that time, and he added a couple of Sufi names to his name. His company in Berkeley was called the Floating Lotus Opera Company. Oh, I forgot the Magic Opera Company. And so I don't know how we got hold of the script, but we seemed to get hold of the script in time to rehearse it and bring it to Nimbin.
It's a song by Bob Dylan called The Times Are Changing. Perfect time. Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that water around you are warm, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. For the times they are changing. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin. There's no telling who that it's naming. For the loser now will be later to win. For the times they are changing. Come senators and congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall. For he who gets hurt will be he who had thought. There's a battle outside and it's raging. You'll soon shake your windows and rattle your wall. For the times they are changing. With the line it is drawn and the curtain us it is cast, and the slow one now will later be fast, as the present now will later be past. The order is rapidly fading, and the first one now will later be last, for the times they are changing.
On the screen, it's going, isn't it? Yes. You'll see some very faded Polaroid photographs of some of the cast that came up from Sydney all those years ago, and possibly later you'll see some sketches for costumes that were worn at the play. But just to say that the play Bliss Apocalypse, it evoked the shadows that at that time haunted young minds in the USA and Australia. Vietnam War, nuclear conflict, the oppression of all those who were seeking change. And it expressed similar themes and aspirations to the rock musical Hair, but on a spiritual plane. It had confronted audiences with a conglomerate of themes and traditions that were pretty unfamiliar, really. The Hindu myths, the anti-war movement, the alternative attitudes, the indigenous shamanism, Greek theatre with chorus and dance. And Daniel Moore's scholarship drew on many strange sources: medieval miracle plays, Greek theatre, Christian Hindu myths, Balinese trance dances. The plot is an interpretation of the Hindu cosmological theory of the ages of the earth that described 3 distinct stages in the life of Mother Earth. These are represented by aspects of the same goddess: her virginal and childbearing age, her matronly maturity, and her old age and madness, yes. And in each age or yuga, she's called first Parvati, then Durga, and finally Kali. So our play presented the current predicament that we're living in the age of Kali, subject to various outbursts of her anger and destruction. As it comes to a close, the destruction is universal, and the earth is close to being totally destroyed and, in a sense, cleansed, making way, however, for the cycles to begin again as the beautiful goddess Parvati returns to renew creation. Daily, our tribe members were absorbed in the task of preparing costumes and props from calico, paper mache, recycled cardboard and bamboo, and regular rehearsals took place between our tents and lean-tos. But we still had time to enjoy the many highlights that we've heard about tonight. The memorable moments like Dollar Brand's piano, Lindsay Burke's ethereal keyboard, the magical moments of from the balls of Bengal. And we pondered the coexistence of Hare Krishnas, Divine Light missionaries, born-again Christians, Ananda Marga, and the iconoclastic, don't forget, Hare Gumboot crowd. Yes. Hey. So it's interesting, Hermann Hesse, the German writer, once said, and I think we could almost, he could well have been talking, I think, about the first Aquarius Festival. And Hermann Hesse said, "In modern times there are poetic creations in which, behind the veil of concern with individuals and characters, the motive is to present a manifold activity of soul." You might like to play now.
Here's a song by Buffy St. Marie called The Universal Soldier. He's 5'2" and he's 6'4", and he fights with spirit, he fights with missiles and with spears, and he's all of 31 and he's only 17, been a soldier for 1,000 years. Catholic, he's a Hindu, he's an atheist and a Jain. He's a Buddhist and a Baptist and a Jew. And he knows he shouldn't kill, and there's a chance he always will. Kill me for you, my friend, and you for me. And he's fighting for Canada, and he's fighting for France. He's fighting for the USA. And he's fighting for the Russians, and he's fighting for Japan. And he thinks he'll put an end to war this way. And he's fighting for democracy, and he's fighting for the red. He says it's for the peace of all. He's the one who must decide who's to live and who's to die. And he never sees the writings on the wall. But without him, how could Hitler have condemned him at Dachau? Without him, Caesar would have stood alone. He's the one who must decide. He's the one who gives his body as a weapon of the war. And without him, all his killings can go on. He's a universal soldier, and he really is to blame. His orders come from far away, no more. They come from here and there, and you and me, and brother, can't you see? This is not the way to put an end to war.
Thank you. I think we'll leave it there for now. That was a little breath from 1973 to 2023. So thank you, John and Samir, for that beautiful performance.
Thank you.
We're now going to finish with just two songs from someone who all of you will know, or many of you will know. Fantuzzi was one of the great highlights of 1973. It's lovely to have him back in Australia and back with us at this time. You saw him earlier up on the screen with Paul Joseph, and just to finish the night, a lovely coda from Fantuzzi.
I got my first gig from Johnny working for the government. I had, in 1975, a theater group with 6 cars full of people. And of course, 4 of them were named John and played bass. Don't ask me what that's about. But here's a little song, because I just love you all so much. I've never collected so much, like my phone, it must be full now. Well, I'm so excited to be here. People tell me I was here in 73. I don't remember that. But I was here in 75, and I had a really great time. And I've been here about 16 or 17 times since then. And I'm saying that I'm never going to come back, but now I'm double thinking that. How could I not, right? So here we go. All of hell is breaking loose, but if we choose to see the light, the human species is endangered. To save it is our plight. Water is life, can't be polluted. Air essential through all living things. Sun through holes in our ozone layers. Hey, someone's got to do something. And if you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, then you can sing. So let's all joined together, save the earth. Woo! A dance and sing. Save the earth. A dance and sing. Save Aquarius. A dance and sing. Save a tree. A dance and sing. So let's look at the big picture and conserve some energy. And for every living creature, there'll be peace and joy, plenty. Oh shit, I lost it here. We didn't inherit this earth from our forefathers. We are borrowing it from our children. And unless we turn this thing around, there won't be a place for us to live in. Save the earth. Save the earth. Woo! A dance and sing. Dance and sing. Save the earth. Save the earth. Dance and sing. Dance and sing. Save the earth. Save the earth. Woo! Save the earth. 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 Thank you.
Thank you, Fantuzzi. Wonderful, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. It's been a long night, but I hope you've taken away a few insights into some of the wonderful Aquarius elders who helped to create what we all enjoy today. Thank you for coming, and good night.
US 17, that must have been such a blessing. I was already Yeah, but that's such a, what I mean is such a like a very fertile. It was, yeah, I became fertilized, but I got it down to it. So I basically stay here. The outside world and my attitude. The following year I was starting. Wow. Yeah, at the age of 18. And then, I didn't do a lot of extra stuff. I came back, but I stuff a lot of environmental stuff.